This is the ClarkCast podcast on clarkcast.com.
Men are not permitted to discuss reproduction, pregnancies, women's health, or abortion. No, that's not me saying this. This is actually Nancy Pelosi. The audio and so much more coming up in just a bit. Also, the Secret Service has just leaked personal information about Republican Congressman Jason Chaffetz. You heard me correctly. The Secret Service. Surprised? Even in today's 2015 America, a little bit, yeah. We'll cover this chilling story today, but first, it goes without saying, but our thoughts, our prayers are with the victims' families of the Oregon shooting. It probably also goes without saying, but the emotion-driven tactic, never let a good crisis go to waste, was launched mere moments after the first shots were fired. Yes, it's disgraceful, to say the least. Ohio's Overman warrior, Rich Hoffman, joins me for the entire hour today on the ClarkCast.
This, Saving the Republic, is one broadcast at a time. The ClarkCast with Matt Clark.
Right now, I can imagine the press release is being cranked out. We need more guns, they'll argue. Fewer gun safety laws. Does anybody really believe that? There are scores of responsible gun owners in this country. They know that's not true. We know because of the polling that says the majority of Americans understand we should be changing these laws, including the majority of responsible, law-abiding gun owners. There is a gun for roughly every man, woman, and child in America. So how can you, with a straight face, make the argument that more guns will make us safer?
Again, on the heels, not even on the heels, almost while in progress, cries of gun control can be heard from Washington and those on the side of, let's say, taking away your Second Amendment rights. Welcome to the ClarkCast. My name is Matt Clark. This right here is the show that unveils the insanity of today's politics every Saturday from 1 to 2 o'clock right here on WAAM in the People's Republic of Ann Arbor, Michigan, also on FTR Radio. If you want to get in touch with this show, if you want to contact me, 734-822-1600 is the phone number, 734-822-1600. Of course, you can also hit me up behind the scenes, Matt with 2 T's, at clarkcast.com. Again, I want to stress, it goes without saying, but I actually do want to say it again. Our hearts, our prayers, our thoughts go out to the victims' families. And what happened is tragic. Nobody denies that. Nobody denies that it's tragic. But you cannot let emotion drive the aftermath of anything, whether it's a shooting, whether it's a natural disaster. It doesn't matter. You cannot let emotion drive the policies, the conversation, and heaven forbid, politics after an event like that. Like I said, joining me for the entire hour, my good friend, my buddy down in Ohio, Overman warrior, Rich Hoffman, author of overmanwarrior.com, also Tail of the Dragon, and a new book that I always give you enough time to plug this, and I think the first time, Rich, welcome to the show, by the way, but the first time I had you on the air to plug some of your new stuff, I think we waited to the very end of the show for the last 30 seconds. Right. My apologies for that. So I want to give your thoughts on all of the above, and it's so tragic. It is so tragic. But never let a good crisis go to waste is the mantra, is the theme of all of this. And I hate to say that because I sound dirty inside, Rich, when I say never let a good crisis go to waste, even though I don't do that.
Right. Well, I mean, it's because you're a good person. And I'm sure that Obama's listening right now because you're such a popular radio person.
Nah.
I'm sure his people are tuned in right now, just as I know most of southern Michigan is. And I just have to say to him, I have a straight face right now, and I can say it. We need more guns. You don't need just a gun for every man, woman, child, dog, cat, goldfish that there is. You need 2 or 3. Because if there had been people present in that tragedy that were trained, that were carrying, they could have stopped the thing instead of letting this guy terrorize people for a good amount of time before security was able to come in there and put an end to it, and a lot less damage would have been done.
Absolutely. I want to do 2 things. I want to replay that Obama audio, and here's why I want to do that. I want the listening audience to not only listen to the president's words, but I would argue more importantly, listen to the president's tone. I open up the show by saying, don't let emotion drive you. In your latest blog post, Rich, titled An Oregon Tragedy, Why America Needs More Second Call Defense in the NRA, that was one of your points. Do not let emotion drive whatever happens next after the shooting. And that's applicable to anything, not just a shooting, not just anything else. Everything. Don't let emotion drive anything that you do. It can drive a passion. It can be the kindling for a conversation, but then logic needs to take over. Like I said, let me replay the President of the United States and pay more attention to the tone more than just his words.
Right now, I can imagine the press releases being cranked out. We need more guns, they'll argue. Fewer gun safety laws. Does anybody really believe that? There are scores of responsible gun owners in this country. They know that's not true. We know because of the polling that says the majority of Americans understand we should be changing these laws, including the majority of responsible, law-abiding gun owners. There is a gun for roughly every man, woman, and child in America. So how can you, with a straight face, make the argument that more guns will make us safer?
Now, I don't know what these laws are that he's talking about because it's so vague. But I said I would play 2 bits of audio, and I think the second one is even more powerful. Bill O'Reilly, somebody I don't watch every night, in fact, I rarely watch him, actually had a fantastic, I wouldn't say rebuttal, but he had a very passionate plea to the president that he said was not scripted. This was from the heart. I want to play that because I think it underscores really the focal point of where gun control should lie. But unfortunately, the conversation does not center around this.
I don't have a script here. I'm just talking to President Obama right now, okay? It's just me to him. You say that the states that have the most gun laws have the least gun violence. Your home state of Illinois has perhaps the most stringent gun laws in the country. Chicago is the largest city in Illinois. Since 2012, there have been 6,000 shootings. 6,000 shootings in the city of Chicago. There have been 1,679 murders in the city of Chicago. Many of them exactly where you worked as a community organizer. So you know the problem that Chicago has. And you also know, Mr. President, that Chicago has extremely stringent gun laws. In fact, Chicago is confiscating guns against the Second Amendment until the courts stop that.
Now, Rich, here's where I don't know. Let me ask you a question that I sincerely do ask because I don't know the answer to this. I do believe the president's tone, and again, I asked you and everybody else to pay attention to the tone, I do believe that was sincere. I think he was genuinely upset, and maybe, again, it was emotion driving that. But at the same time, we all know, never let a good crisis go to waste, so I'm watching the other hand. What I don't understand, though, and I know this is a lack of education, a lack of the media reporting this, how can anybody get away with screaming gun control, gun control, gun control when you have statistics like that? Chicago, which is the poster board child for gun control, that's the part that I don't understand.
Well, I think the president is one of the, how many times have we talked about that president and all the strange behaviors that he has? And when you hear him, he sounds very convinced, and I think he has a lot in common with a typical Hollywood actor or actress that takes up some of these liberal agenda points. You know, they can look in a camera, they can cry on cue, and they can make themselves believe just about anything because the essence of what they are underneath their public persona isn't grounded in much reality based on observable fact. And he can convince himself of a lot of things, and I think he's still that young Marxist kid that ran around Chicago, University of Chicago with all those radicals 20, 30 years ago and formulated a lot of his beliefs on the Democratic talking points. And he believes it to his core when he has to. But he doesn't pay attention to all those facts. And he's completely been an ideology. And it's not rooted in anything that's tangibly real. And he says there's polls that say that Americans believe otherwise. I don't see those polls. Otherwise, they'd be screaming for more gun control.
Well,
he Republicans and conservatives.
Hold on, let me jump in here. He said polls of gun owners that agree that there needs to be stricter laws. And I don't know what stricter laws mean. It's so vague. Whether it's the president, whether it's anybody that we're talking about that's pushing gun control, nobody wants to get specific. I was talking about the lack of specificity when it came to the rich need to pay their fair share a couple weeks ago. Nobody will tell me what is quote unquote, the rich. Tell me, who are these rich? Are they millionaires and billionaires? Because that just doesn't encompass the 1%. The 1% is anybody who makes more than 300-something thousand, which is a lot of money, but that's not a millionaire billionaire. And then finally, the follow-up question to that is, what is the fair share? And I'm not trying to get into that conversation, but my point is, nobody wants to give specifics on that agenda. Similarly to that, nobody wants to give specifics on what gun control entails. Is it zero sales of guns? Is it only the ones? And we know that a lot of members of Congress will just go through a gun magazine and go, that one looks scary. We should outlaw that one because it looks scary. We know for a fact that does happen. What are these laws that you want to implement? Who do they affect? Nobody wants to get specific. So maybe when you go to somebody like a gun owner like me, Rich, let me ask you, pretend I'm a pollster, right? And let me ask you a question. Should we have more background checks for those trying to buy a gun? How many people are just going to say yes? I mean,
sure.
a vast majority. And so they'll take that simple poll question, and then they'll go to the news outlets and say, 98.725% of those polled said that background checks need to be more strict.
Right.
Well, that's not where you were driving from.
And you already have those background checks, and they're already implemented, and they work. I mean, I go through it quite a lot. I'm sure you do too. And every time you buy one, you go through a background check. They don't just let any yahoo go get one.
It's called a NICS check. It's called a NICS check. Yeah. The FBI gets a little phone call and says, hey, is this guy Rich Hoffman good, or is he not? Does he have a record? Can we sell him this firearm?
Right. And your name's on a list, and they type the name in, and if it comes up as you've been talking to Syria, or sending secret messages through Russia or China, and hey, let's check him out another day. So they look at you a little further. It works.
So just playing on that vagueness a little bit more, the president obviously had a long list of things to say, and this is the only other follow-up that I want. Playing him, here it is.
Our freedom and our Constitution prohibits any modest regulation of how we use a deadly weapon when there are law-abiding gun owners all across the country who could hunt and protect their families and do everything they do under such regulations.
Modest regulation is now how he's phrasing that.
Yeah.
And this isn't necessarily to target him, because I more and more, I think he's more of a puppet rather than a puppeteer. But the point is, it's this soft language that resonates with people. It does, without anybody really knowing. The country is dumb as a whole, because they're paying attention to football or everything else more than what's actually going on. So when you start saying, why don't we have just basic regulate? I forget what he even said. Vague. Hold on, I need to get this right.
Our freedom,
and
our Constitution,
fast forward, go.
Prohibits any modest,
there it is,
regulation.
By the way, I don't know whether he's talking like Captain Kirk must talk like modest regulation, though. Rich, I'm a little mind blown by how powerful of a phrase this is, and maybe I'm making nothing out of this. But modest regulation, is that the new talking point that's going to come down? I don't know.
Well, you can reflect that on Nancy Pelosi's letter she sent out to John Boehner last night, asking for, hey, let's look at this, but let's not stop there. There's an extra sentence in her note asking for more gun regulations, or for Congress to consider more gun regulations, insinuating that there would be more to come if they could get a foot in the door. And I bet you most Americans know more about the score from Thursday night's Pittsburgh-Baltimore Ravens game than they know that she sent that letter. And that's what they play on, that ignorance and that emotion from a tragedy. And the thing that is most alarming to me is how quick we are to just jump on this kid and say, hey, he was a young boy who didn't have a girlfriend, and that was a cause. Let's not announce his name. Let's not show too many pictures of him. Let's just go to guns. And there's a lot more to the story. I can guarantee you that, and it's going to come out.
I actually have highlighted, I pulled down your blog post, I highlighted exactly what you were talking about. And when we come back from the break,
Matt Clark,
I think that's a really great place to continue this conversation. Is why exactly are we only focusing on the tool, i.e. the gun that was used, and not the actual person? Because a gun is nothing more than a tool. And anybody who actually grew up around guns was taught that. I was taught that, Rich. I'm sure you were taught that. A gun is nothing more than a tool. I was also taught by my dad at a very, very, very young age, you always treat every single weapon as if it were loaded. And it's just those small, let's just say, educational tips that everybody should have gotten when they were younger that gives you a respect for, what is it? Oh, yeah, the tool. More in just a few moments here if you want to be part of the conversation. 734-822-1600. 734-822-1600. Back in a few moments here.
This is the Clark Cast with Matt Clark. The Clark Cast. Matt Clark is live and on air now.
Logic will triumph over emotion every single time. Thanks for listening to the Clarkcast. My name is Matt Clark. If you want to hit me up behind the scenes, Matt with 2 T's at clarkcast.com is the email address. Of course, you can call me up right now, 734-822-1600. Joining me on via Skype, my good buddy Rich Hoffman down in Ohio, author of Tale of the Dragon, also The Curse of Fort 7 Mile, which you can actually get from his website, overmanwarrior.com. Rich, welcome back to this show. And by the way, the latest blog post, speaking of plugging your work and your writing, you do daily blog posts, which, by the way, I have no idea how you find the time to write so much, but my hat's off to you. That's a compliment, not an insult.
It's a lot.
The latest post as of today, October 3rd, an Oregon tragedy, why America needs more second call defense and the NRA. Let's talk about second call defense and the NRA portion of this in just a little bit. I want to highlight something that you mentioned just as we were going to break and something that you actually wrote in that blog post. And let me just read a little bit of this here. In the case of this Oregon shooter, again, it's another kid, 26-year-old with a hyphenated name. There's something to be said about the reason so many of these young kids are feeling desperate enough to end their own lives and kill as many people as possible. Causes for the failed behavior would be progressive educations, changing masculine roles socially, and copycat crimes. There are many causes for the violence, but the gun is just a tool in the killing. I think that's exactly what both of us said. How ironic at the very tail end of last segment. That's, by the way, not written in your article. So long as society imposes progressive beliefs upon young minds in conflict with their natural inclinations, there will be occasional clashes with elements of our society who crack mentally under pressure. Now, you go on a little bit more, but I think that's powerful. We keep focusing on just the guns, but we don't focus on the individuals. Two things are happening. One, these are happening in gun-free zones, and let's talk about that after the next break.
Right.
Two, they all seem to be younger male kids.
Yeah. You have to deal with the cause. You can't just deal with the effect. If the effect is mass shootings, why are they increasing? And why are they increased during President Obama's watch? Because, you go through the early 2000s and the 1990s and the 80s, and this kind of stuff wasn't happening. And guns, there was a lot more of an open relationship with guns in movies and television and that kind of thing. So what's changed? And you had a president that's been in the White House that's very progressive. You had a lot of things crammed down people's throats. You've had this millennials trying to hit the job market, and there's not a lot out there. They're looking for some substance. They've had a pretty anti-family administration when it comes to liberals who have, like Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid, and the kind of things they advocate are very anti-family. And you got a lot of kids that don't really know where to go, and they latch onto these crazy ideologies. I think that's the story. It has nothing to do with guns.
Oh, very much so. And even if you wanted to tie in the Planned Parenthood stuff, we're at a place, and this isn't necessarily a pro versus anti-abortion. It goes further than that. The Planned Parenthood videos that were uncovered show us that there is a complete disregard of life. And I don't actually mean the videos necessarily, which it does show there's a complete sense of life, but the reaction or lack thereof from the masses against what was happening. We are selling baby parts off, and just it boggles my mind how there's not a huge uproar against that part right there. And I think that encompasses your overarching point here is we don't value life anymore.
No, we don't. And you can see, the way they fought back, obvious evidence. I mean, you have a videotape of people actually talking about it, and they attacked the people who took the videotape. And you have the same thing here. There's evidence that will come out. There's some evidence that's already out with regarding this Oregon shooter that you can't jump to conclusions too fast because, this guy said, "Are you Christian?" Okay, I'm going to shoot you. That's a story.
That's very much a story. Rich Hoffman.
There's a root cause there.
Rich Hoffman on the air right now, author of Overman Warrior. Also, he's author of Tale of the Dragon and The Curse of Fort 7 Mile, which you can actually get off his website for free at overmanwarrior.com. When we come back, I want to expand upon all of the above a little bit more and also dovetail into the Jason Chaffetz issue, where the Secret Service didn't really care for the congressman and what he was doing on the Oversight Committee. So they chose to actually release some embarrassing information on him. How do you feel about the Secret Service doing that? Welcome to America 2015. This and so much more coming up after the break. Stay tuned and don't go anywhere.
This is the Clark Cast with Matt Clark. Like the show on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/ClarkCast. This is the Clark Cast with Matt Clark. Call Matt now, 734-822-1600.
Welcome back to it. My name is Matt Clark. This right here is the show that unveils the insanity of today's politics every Saturday from 1 to 2 o'clock. Be sure to check out my website, clarkcast.com. Of course, like me on Facebook at facebook.com/ClarkCast. And at ClarkCast is the Twitter handle. Do all of that. Do it right now. Unless you're driving, then probably not a good idea. Joining me right now via Skype, my good friend, the Warrior, the Overman Warrior down in Ohio, Rich Hoffman, author of OvermanWarrior.com, Tale of the Dragon, and The Curse of Fort 7 Mile, which you can actually get at his website, OvermanWarrior.com. Rich, the Oregon shooting is a topic that is new, but I would argue all of the contents that we have discussed in this radio show thus far, not new so much.
No, it's a repeating cycle,
very
a broken
much so.
record.
Very much so. And, the president will make arguments saying, well, look, how many more shootings need to happen in order for you to understand, nation, that we need to have, and this is the phrase that scared me in the very first segment, modest regulation. That was the phrase that he used. And I'm not sure whether that's just off the cuff, whether that was unscripted, or, and here's where my gut's somewhat telling me, that's going to be the new buzz phrase, modest regulation. And doesn't that sound so warm and cuddly? And that's exactly what we need. We need some modest regulation. But the one thing that he fails to identify is what is similar in all of these mass shootings. What is the common denominator here? Sheriff David Clark out of Milwaukee, fantastic guy. Absolutely great guy. He actually has some words to the president and to anybody else who fails to identify that common denominator.
I'll answer your question, what law could be changed. We should get rid of these gun-free zones. We should allow people, under certain circumstances, concealed carry license holders, to be able to play a role in their own safety. I think it's heartless to expect people in these gun-free zones to be lined up and slaughtered with no way to defend themselves. These gun-free zones have become killing fields. That is the one constant in all of these mass murders, including the military recruiting section.
What do you think,
where
Sheriff?
the President of the United States doesn't even trust soldiers stateside to go armed.
Well, that's a different issue within itself, but absolutely right.
Right. And that's a sheriff.
That's a sheriff elected by the people.
That's the opinion of someone who's been out there and has done and seen the way reality functions, as opposed to a community activist before he became a president, which is a spokesman for progressive causes.
Well, not only that, Rich, hold on. Let me add one more qualifier into that. Not only a law enforcement officer, but somebody who was elected by his constituents. So he serves a group of people that decided to put him into the sheriff's role, which I think is huge.
Right. He's accountable directly based on a performance-based assertion given his job performance.
Exactly. So let's couple this together. In the very first segment, we talked about the statistics around Chicago, which is, I would say, their poster board child for gun-free zones, for gun control. Yep. Chicago, Illinois in general, which is Barack Obama's home state, not Hawaii or whatever, but that's where he calls home these days. That right there is the poster board child for gun control, and yet there are more. It's actually Murder City. You think Detroit's bad? Hey, let's look at Chicago. I think the stat that we rambled off earlier was 6,000 shootings by guns alone since 2012. And it's a gun-free zone. So, hey, gun-free zones means no shooting of guns at all. Not. So we have that. And also, let's couple the common denominator that all of these mass shootings that are reported in 7, 8 years, whatever, have all taken place, or 99% of them have taken place at gun-free zones.
Yeah. And Chicago's an interesting story because it's one of those things that's been it's propped up by debt. It's a beautiful city when you go visit. They have nice museums, a beautiful lake, but They didn't make the lake. The lake was already there. And they built some nice little skyscrapers along the lakefront. But if you go out around the perimeter, you see the failed policies of progressivism that are just rotting the thing. And it's currently on the verge of bankruptcy. It could be bankrupt. It should be bankrupt now, but it's not. And that should be the big story. And then all this gun, because you have a bad economy, nobody has any hope for the future. And then they just run around and the kids get in the drugs and they get these gangs and then they have drug wars and they shoot guns at each other. And it's a failure of progressive policy because it's a very progressive city. Mm-hmm. And you add it all up and it's a failure on the kind of politics that Obama has constructed for his party. And he hasn't constructed himself. He represents it. But Chicago is a disaster, and the gun violence reflects the disaster of progressive policy.
Exactly. All right, your thoughts at 734-822-1600, 734-822-1600. I want to transition to another really big topic, and I would say prior to the Oregon shooting, this one got me up in arms, pun not intended. I was royally, I don't want to say upset because I'm not implying that there was crying or a napkin or a tissue or anything involved. But when I heard that Representative Jason Chaffetz, he is a Utah congressman, a Republican, also chairman of the House Oversight Committee, was, I don't want to say blackmailed, but the U.S. Secret Service was releasing embarrassing information about him because he was investigating the numerous scandals of the Secret Service. When I heard this story, I almost flipped out. And I have some audio, and CNN actually did a decent job covering this, and they had Jason Chaffetz in studio with Wolf Blitzer talking about this. But I want to play that audio, but before I do, let's put this into context here. The U.S. Secret Service, which is arguably thought of as the most elite organization to protect people. You would agree with that, right? That's the perception of the Secret Service, Rich?
Oh, yeah. Secret of the most secret. James Bond stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And only the best of the best of the best can actually become a Secret Service agent. That's the perception.
Right.
And then we had the Colombian prostitution scandal that happened. We had a Secret Service agent DUI crashing into the White House fence, not to mention how many White House not break-ins, but somebody jumping the fence. And so a lot of people coming into the White House that were unknown, not to mention the party crashers when Obama took office initially. So there's a lot of scandal within the Secret Service.
Yeah, they've been caught with their pants down, figuratively and literally.
I like that. I mean, I don't, but I like, anyway. Think of this. So if the Secret Service is upset that the Congress is investigating them because, hey, there's some scandals here, they decide to retaliate. And that's what this is, retaliation. Take a listen to this first report from CNN.
The Inspector General of the U.S. Secret Service, which was part of the Department of Homeland Security, has now said, and it's pretty disturbing, that that leak that you had applied yourself back in 2003 to be a Secret Service agent, you got rejected for whatever reason, that was inappropriate, it was confidential, and it should never have been made public. This is pretty embarrassing for the U.S. Secret Service that they've gone ahead and now acknowledged that one of the top officials there had deliberately decided to smear you.
Deliberately decided, and it was actually an assistant director. Here's the follow-up to that.
I'm a sitting member of Congress. I'm the chairman of the Oversight Committee. I have a constitutional responsibility to provide oversight, but it's pretty disturbing that the Secret Service would dive into my own personal
Apparently
records.
45 Secret Service officials, they got this information. The Assistant Director, Edward Lowry, he wrote an email to fellow directors back on March 31st saying some information that he, meaning you, might find embarrassing needs to get out just to be fair. And then they leaked this to some website. And it was obviously embarrassing. And now the Inspector General says that was totally inappropriate. This was confidential information. It should have never been made public. Has anybody called to apologize to you?
I did have Secretary Johnson today call and apologize. Jay Johnson,
Secretary of Homeland Security.
Yes, I did have the director of the Secret Service call and apologize again. They've each called now twice, but that ain't good enough. That is not good enough. They have a deep-seated cultural problem in the Secret Service. I worry that if they're doing this to me, they're doing it to who knows how many other people.
I don't think cultural problem is the right phrase to use. And this is on par with the IRS targeting conservative groups, Rich.
It's systemic. It's a culture of, we're all equal. Don't throw rocks in glass houses because we'll be able to get you. And when they have the leverage position like that because they have all the power and access to it, when you have the kind of people like this Lowry guy who's in charge, it refers back to your previous segment where Obama was oblivious to why would people need so many guns. Well, if people like that or who run the government, and if they left unchecked, say Chavez said, "Hey, I'm not going to do this. I don't want to be embarrassed," and he stops doing oversight, so things get worse and worse. How do you stop it then?
This is a weapon. It's a tool. It's an intimidation tool. It's not just embarrassing. I mean, this is intimidation. And to Chaffetz's point, this is what we know about. How many other instances of not just the Secret Service, but any organization that has something on anybody? And I know this sort of blackmail has existed since the dawn of the Constitution, or even before that, just human nature. But when it comes to 2015 America, when we have somebody who is on a very powerful position, if you're the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, that is a powerful position. And then all of a sudden they're investigating a legitimate scandal. No, Republicans, Democrats all agree that the Secret Service has some cobwebs that are pretty bad. I mean, nobody says, well, the clubbing and prostitution, that really wasn't a scandal. Everybody agrees that was a scandal. Everybody believes there are legitimate things to investigate here. That said, when the Secret Service says, back off, we don't like this, we're going to release the stuff about you that we know about you, a 2003 application to become one of us or whatever it is. Why is this not being reported more? I got it. The Oregon shooting happened, but wow.
Hey, I didn't know about it until you told me. And so it's a fairly significant story, but it's being lost in the news cycle.
There needs to be a mass firing of all management inside the Secret Service.
I think you need to have mass firing of just about everybody in government.
What?
You just restart over. Because everywhere you go, you find this.
That's true. That's true. Well, I mean, it could start right here. Everybody that's in a managerial position inside the Secret Service, gone. I don't care whether they're... Chaffetz mentioned a cultural issue. Again, I don't think culture is necessarily the problem. I think it goes a lot deeper than that. But you cannot just have, a couple rogue agents. What it came down to is the report, 45 people inside the Secret Service accessed Chaffetz's report. If that isn't bad enough, one of the assistant directors says, we need to get him. This needs to get out.
Yeah, well, they should fire everybody involved, starting with that Lowry guy, just to be fair.
Yeah, just because it is about fairness these days, right, Rich?
Yes, it's all about fairness. So to be fair, get rid of him.
Just get rid of him. All right, your thoughts at 734-822-1600, 734-822-1600. Let's go to the phones and welcome Dave to the show. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hey, gentlemen. Good, and thanks for having me on. I just wanted to comment on the gun issue. Let me put some pre-qualifiers out there. First, I consider myself an independent, both sides, depending on the quality of the candidate. Not a moderate, not a conservative. It's an issue-by-issue discussion. Also, I've spent over 40 years in law enforcement at every level. And we're simplifying the issue and dilemma that we have on guns in the U.S. right now. The extreme positions are not workable. Those who want to ban guns altogether, there's a reason for the Second Amendment. I'm a believer in the Second Amendment. But those who say that, look, the simplest solution is we arm everybody, make sure that if you want to be safe in America, you have to carry a gun. If that's our position, that's not the type of country I think most Americans want to live in.
I don't know of many people who are pushing for that, Dave. I don't know of many people that are saying every single person needs to be armed, but I do know of many people, and I would include myself in part of that group, that says, if you want to be armed, if you want to take the initiatives, I am actually a CPL holder right now. I went through the classes. I go to the range to practice, and at times I do carry a gun, but I'm not saying everybody should be armed. I definitely do not want to make that a mandate.
Well, and that's the point I want to drive at. Exactly the point. There has to be some settlement in between that. The issue of the ease with which people can get guns today, either illegally or legally. The gun registration system, which is not consistent from state to state, is a farce. You can go to a gun show, and quite frankly, unfortunately for a few, not all people, the scrupulous few, but they're there, will sell a gun to virtually anybody if the price is right. So we have a problem with access to guns, and the shame of it is we have the ability to fix it, but because of the extreme positions taken by the NRA, not taken by most licensed gun owners, who understand that we need, and I hate to use the word because you're going to shrink at this, reasonable regulation. That's exactly what we do need.
Modest, Dave. They're talking about modest regulation. Yeah,
whatever you said. Yeah. And the point is, when we get to the extreme discussions, the bottom line is nothing has happened. The right has blocked it consistently. The left has blocked it. for lawfully licensed gun owners, most of them support. As a matter of fact, I think that the polls I've seen on both sides, whether it's Fox News or one of the other networks, show that the support is there. So we've got to get off dead center and understand what we're doing is not there. Second thing I want to point out, and I appreciate that many gun owners go to the range. There's a far different situation from tactical shooting that we teach law enforcement officers, tactical shooting the military uses, which is completely different, and what happens when you can hit a bullseye at 25 yards, 20 yards, 50 yards, and that sort of thing. Far different. We train law enforcement officers, and no matter how much we train them and the hours and hours and hours they spend training, they are still susceptible to making mistakes. So we have to have a realistic discussion of what's going out there. Thirdly, there used to be a day when the local police chief, based on information that he had at his disposal, could deny a person from purchasing a gun or carrying a concealed weapon. But again, this time I fault the conservatives for this. They tried to make a Second Amendment argument on that. And so now, those police chiefs who had to go through a review board before they canceled it don't have that authority.
Well, I mean, you're talking about a shall issue state versus a may issue state. And when you had an issue, is as long as you can legally have a gun, you don't have any sort of felonies, you don't have any sort of documented mental cases. And yes, there does need to be a greater conversation about who can obtain a gun and how. But, based on your conversation here, Dave, I mean, you're blaming more on the right than the left. And I use right, left very loosely here. And I think it's important to note, I mean, every single mass shooting that we've had have all happened on gun-free zones. So people instantly jump to, well, we need to make sure that we have tighter regulations and tighter laws. And that's, we can explore that. We're having an honest civil conversation right now about that. But what I do not hear is people saying, you know what, gun-free zones are kill zones. When you look at Chicago, when you look at the schools, when that nut job in the movie shooting, he skipped over several theaters in order to get to a gun-free zone. Nobody is talking about that. I'm more than happy to have reasonable conversations about who, how, when guns can happen. Not necessarily conceding anything, but I'm more than happy to have good conversations about it. But I think we need to put all of the cards on the table, and the biggest elephant in the room is often left from that discussion.
Well, think about this, because you brought up a valid point on school zones. We want our schools to be safe. But the added problem we've had here in America, and again, I say this as a long-serving law enforcement officer, go ahead and take a look at the staffing levels of your local police departments and sheriff's departments and compare them on a per capita basis or an actual basis as to what you have now. We used to have school safety officers in our schools, made them available. But because of, quite frankly, funding issues and budget cuts, we don't have them anymore. There are ways of making sure, for example, school zones, and I think everybody would agree you would rather have a trained law enforcement officer or a trained security officer in those schools than you would have people who, quite frankly, may not have the temperament or the experience to deal in a tactical situation when you have so many children in a situation like that. We can fix this, but we don't take it down to the basic issues.
I got that. And Dave, I hate to cut you off, but I really do have to fly. We only have a couple minutes left in the program here. And by the way, feel free to call in next week. I would be more than happy to continue this conversation. I think this is a good dialogue to have. Not that I agree with everything that you said, but I think it's a good conversation to have. But again, I go back to the big elephant in the room, Rich. Gun-free zones. And yes, we can have more police officers staffed in schools. We can have that. But you're talking about being more reactive situations like police officers. Police officers are reactive. What about proactive?
Right. Yeah, that was a good call from Dave. I just like listening to the exchange and hearing how other people think, because that's how you solve the problem. But again, the gun-free zone is what you have to start with, because these guys are hitting where there's no one fighting back, and that's the first step. And
bad guys are going to get guns no matter what. So the whole gun show loophole argument, I understand. I can play devil's advocate for that argument. But bad guys are going to get guns no matter what. Why are Chicago, again, 6,000 plus shootings since 2012 in Chicago? What about the Mexican drug cartels? Hello, Operation Fast and Furious. Sorry, Rich, I know you're wearing headphones. Operation Fast and Furious. We were giving guns away. So I get that. And Dave, please call back next week. I would love to continue the conversation. But like I said, I didn't cut you off because I was getting annoyed with you. I actually liked that phone call. But we only have a couple minutes left, and I have to go to a couple more calls here. But we need to address the big elephant in the room, and gun-free zones is at the top of the list. So instead of eroding freedoms as one of the things the president wants to do, how about we look at more proactive approaches, and gun-free zones is at the top of the list?
Yes.
All right, let's go to Jenny. Jenny, welcome. How are you?
Hey, brother. Hey, Rich.
Hey.
Anyway, if I am correct, you can correct me if I'm not. The Secret Service, well, Jason Chaffetz is actually over the Secret Service. They're working for him, right? So, right, why doesn't he have the right to do what he's doing and say what he's saying, etc.? That guy, Lowry, yeah, he's just another one that's corrupt. And who said throw them all out? Which one of you guys?
Well,
yeah,
Rich,
you're right.
Rich was a little bit, I'm going to give credit to Rich for that one right there. The Secret Service actually rose up into the Department of Homeland Security, so they don't work for Congress. They roll up into the Secretary of Homeland Security, and then that guy rolls up into the president. So they don't work for the congressman. But to your point, yeah, as chairman of the House Oversight Committee, or Congress in general, has subpoena power. They have a lot of authority and oversight. Authority, by the way, and I know a lot of people will say, well, I thought you were limited government. That's our authority. We, the people, we have oversight to this kind of stuff. So I hope, and I think I read this a little bit ago, and Rich, you would love this. They're looking at Trey Gowdy to investigate this particular incident.
I'll go
he'll
for
do
that.
a great job.
Absolutely. Hey, Jenny, thanks for the phone call. I appreciate that. You take care.
Okay.
These are good calls. I like this. And, it's the conversations that need to continue over and over again. And that's why I think radio is one of the best mediums of all time.
Yeah, it's instant.
I think we have enough time. I want to play this only because I started out. The very first few words I uttered were men have no right to talk about abortion, reproduction, women's health. And I think it's only appropriate that we give the former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, a little time here on the air.
Is an unborn baby with a human heart and a human liver a human being?
Yeah. Why don't you take your ideological questions? I don't have.
If it's not a human being,
I'm going to stop because it was cutting out. I don't know why. So a reporter asks Nancy Pelosi, is an unborn human being or baby with a heart, a liver, so on and so forth, is that a human being? Let me play it again. Hopefully it doesn't skip this time.
Is an unborn baby with a human heart and a human liver a human being?
Yeah. Why don't you take your ideological questions? I don't have.
If it's not a human being, what species is it?
Listen, I want to say something to you. I don't know who you are, and you're welcome to be here, freedom of this press. I am a devout, practicing Catholic, a mother of 5 children. When my baby was born, my 5th child, my oldest child, was 6 years old. I think I know more about this subject than you.
You know what this is? And I came up with this new feature here on the Clarkcast, and it's only appropriate.
Warning. Saul Alinsky tactic and use.
Yeah.
Warning.
This right here, the newest, the latest and greatest Saul Alinsky tactic is you're a dude. Shut the hell up. You're a dude. And it's even skipping here. What the hell is going on with my software here? Anyway. See, it's skipping. What is going on with my software?
It's been corrupted by progressivism.
It has been corrupted by progressivism.
It's heard too much.
Heard too much. All right, Rich, talk while I try to troubleshoot this here. Go.
Oh, well, in this case, we're supposed to just say, it's the same argument that a woman will throw at you. Well, you try to have a child. You try to deliver a child, and you tell me about pain. Well, yeah, you got a point. I can't argue that. But we are 50% or a little bit under 50% of the population, and we have an opinion on this.
Yeah, and the guys are involved in the whole process. I mean,
the guys are involved in the process. And if we decide we want to take a leak on the side of the highway, I think women would have a fit with that because they, first of all, really can't do that. Even we can. They would have a statement about that. And if we have something to say about bad behavior that's involved around abortion, and she doesn't have a right, Nancy Pelosi that is, doesn't have a right to just toss out something and say, well, I know more about this because I'm a mother and I raised some children and you didn't, and you just got to shut up. So that's not how it works.
No,
we have an opinion and you're defending evil.
That's exactly right. Unfortunately, I'm actually way over past time right now, and because my software kicked out, the news is right underneath us. So, Rich, I appreciate everything that you've done. Thanks for coming on the Clarkcast radio program. Rich Hoffman, author of Overman Warrior, also Tale of the Dragon, The Curse of Fort 7 Mile. Thanks for listening to this week's edition of the Clarkcast radio program. As always, check out my website and more to come. Thanks. Take care.
For show highlights and more, visit www.clarkcast.com.
On the battlefield, there's a saying America's military men and women live by. Never leave a fallen warrior behind, ever. Off the battlefield, Wounded Warrior Project operates with the same goal. We leave no warrior behind. Wounded Warrior Project is a non-profit organization created to help our men and women returning home with the scars of war. Whether those scars are physical or mental, we're here to make sure that they heal. And whether it's helping those with post-traumatic stress disorder live a normal life again, or giving much-needed support to injured warriors in veterans' hospitals. Because no one deserves our help more than the men and women who risk their lives to keep us safe. Wounded Warrior Project. We never leave a fallen warrior behind. Ever. Learn more about what we do at woundedwarriorproject.org.